The night was colder than usual. A quiet wind moved through the small town, rattling tree branches and carrying the sound of dry leaves across the empty street. Daniel, a young man who lived alone in a small wooden house on the edge of town, sat inside with a book in his hands. The world outside was silent, but his calm was broken by a faint sound. At first, he thought it was the wind, but then it came again, a soft scratching, almost like tiny hands touching wood. He froze, listening carefully. Then he heard it again, louder this time, mixed with something else. It was the sound of crying. Daniel's heart began to race. Crying at this time of night? It was past midnight. Who could be outside his house in the cold darkness? Slowly, he put down his book and stood up. The sound pulled him closer to the door. With each step, the scratching grew louder. The cry was not normal. It did not sound like a cat or a baby from the neighborhood. It was different, almost echoing, almost vibrating in the air. He reached the door and hesitated, his hand resting on the cold handle. For a moment, fear filled his chest. What if it was dangerous? What if someone was trying to trick him? But then the cry came again, weaker this time, as if something small and helpless was running out of strength. Daniel could not ignore it anymore. He unlocked the door and slowly pulled it open. The cold night air rushed in, making him shiver. First, he saw nothing. The porch was empty. The streetlight nearby flickered, throwing shadows across the yard. But then he looked down. His breath caught in his throat. Right there, on the wooden floor of his porch, lay something he had never seen in his life. It was a baby, but not a human baby. The small body was wrapped in rough cloth, torn and dirty, but from within, faint blue light shone through. The baby's skin was not normal. It was pale silver with a soft glow, and its tiny hands had 3 long fingers instead of 5. Its eyes, half open, shimmered like pools of liquid stars. The cries came from its mouth, soft but strange, like a song breaking into sobs. Daniel stepped back in shock, his mind spinning. Was he dreaming? Was this real? He rubbed his eyes, but the image stayed. The baby was trembling, weak, and its glow flickered as though fading away. Then he noticed something else. On the cloth wrapped around the baby were markings, strange symbols glowing faintly in green light. They looked alive, like they were moving across the fabric, pulsing in rhythm with the baby's breaths. Daniel crouched down, his hands shaking. He wanted to reach out, but fear held him still. Suddenly, he felt a presence. His eyes darted toward the trees at the edge of his yard. There was a shadow, tall and thin, watching him from the darkness. The figure did not move, but its glowing eyes reflected the moonlight. Daniel's breath grew heavy. Whoever left the baby was still there. The shadow shifted slightly, as if torn between coming closer and running away. Then, before Daniel could speak, the figure vanished into the darkness, swallowed by the trees. Daniel was left standing alone on his porch with the baby glowing weakly at his feet. His heart pounded. 1,000 questions raced through his head. Who was that figure? Why had they left the baby here? Why his house? He looked down again. The baby's cries were weaker now, almost fading into silence. Its glowing eyes closed halfway, and its little body trembled with cold. Instinct broke through his fear. Whatever this baby was, it was helpless, and it needed him. Daniel bent down carefully, sliding his arms beneath the child. The moment he touched it, he felt warmth run through his hands, almost electric, almost alive. The baby was lighter than he expected, fragile like glass. It clutched at his shirt with its 3 small fingers and gave a soft whimper. Daniel held it close, feeling its small chest rise and fall. As he stood there in the doorway, he felt the weight of the decision pressing on him. He could close the door, call someone, or run away, but something deep inside told him he couldn't. This child was not just strange. It was abandoned, left alone in the cold with no one else to care for it. And now, somehow, it had been given to him. Daniel carried the baby inside, closing the door behind him. The warm air of the house wrapped around them both. He placed the child gently on a blanket near the fireplace and stared at it, his mind still racing. The glowing symbols on the cloth pulsed faintly, casting shadows on the walls. He sat down slowly, rubbing his forehead. He had so many questions but no answers. He only knew one thing: his life had just changed forever. And somewhere in the dark woods, the eyes that had watched him still lingered, watching, waiting, as if the night had only begun. The baby lay on the blanket near the fireplace, its faint glow giving the room an otherworldly shine. Daniel sat close, staring at it, still unable to believe what he had found on his doorstep. His mind wanted to argue that it was impossible, that it was all a trick of the night, but the proof was right there in front of him. The strange symbols on the cloth shifted like living threads, and the baby's tiny chest rose and fell with each fragile breath. Every few moments, its eyelids fluttered open, revealing eyes that glimmered like two small galaxies, pulling Daniel into their depth. He had never seen anything so beautiful and frightening at the same time. For a while, the room was quiet except for the crackle of firewood. But Daniel could not shake the feeling that he was not truly alone. That shadow he had seen in the woods still haunted his thoughts. The glowing eyes, the tall figure standing still as a statue before vanishing. It had not been a dream. Someone had left this child here, and Daniel had the strong sense they were still watching. He stood up, walked to the window, and pulled back the curtain just enough to peer into the night. The trees swayed gently in the wind, the ground was covered in a thin layer of frost, and the streetlight at the corner hummed softly. Everything looked normal, yet the hairs on the back of his neck stood straight. He turned back to the baby only to freeze again. The glow of the cloth had grown brighter, and the baby was stirring, its little hands waving weakly in the air. Daniel knelt beside it, worried. The child let out a soft cry, and the sound vibrated strangely through the air, rattling the glass of the windows. Daniel placed a hand gently on the baby's chest to calm it down. To his shock, the baby responded, clutching his finger tightly with its 3 long fingers. He felt warmth flow into him again, but this time it was stronger, almost like a pulse of energy moving from the child's body into his own. His arm tingled, and for a moment he thought he saw the symbols on the cloth shimmer brighter in response to his touch. Before he could process what was happening, there was a sound outside, a rustling heavier than the wind. Daniel jumped to his feet and turned toward the door. His pulse quickened. Someone was out there. He stepped quietly across the floor, careful not to startle the baby. The noise came again, this time from the side of the house, near the back door. He grabbed the nearest thing he could use as protection, an old metal lampstand, and moved slowly toward the noise. His footsteps were soft, but inside his head, his heartbeat roared like drums. He reached the door and pressed his ear against it. The sound was clearer now, shuffling steps, almost stumbling, as if someone weak was trying to walk. Then a soft knock, not hard and sharp, but weak and hesitant, as though whoever was outside barely had the strength to make it. Daniel's grip tightened on the lampstand. The baby gave another faint cry from the living room, and suddenly he understood. Whoever was outside, it had to be connected to the child. Taking a deep breath, he unlocked the door and pulled it open. His body tensed, ready to swing the lampstand if he had to. But what he saw made his hand slowly drop. Standing just outside in the cold was the figure from before. It was a woman, at least she looked somewhat like one. Her body was tall and thin, her skin pale and faintly glowing under the moonlight, marked with patterns that resembled the same strange symbols on the baby's cloth. Her hair, long and dark, fell loosely around her shoulders, and her eyes shone like 2 bright crystals filled with pain and exhaustion. She looked more fragile than threatening. Her arms hung weakly at her sides, and her legs trembled as though they would give out at any moment. When her eyes met Daniel's, there was no hatred, no aggression, only desperation. She opened her mouth as if to speak, but only a broken sound came out, a mix of cough and breath. She swayed forward, nearly collapsing, and Daniel instinctively reached out to steady her. Her skin was cold, icy like someone who had walked for days in the winter without food or shelter. She clutched his sleeve weakly, and for the first time, Daniel saw the emotion in her eyes: fear, sorrow, and a strange kind of hope. Daniel guided her inside, helping her to a chair near the fireplace. The baby's cries grew louder when it sensed her presence, and the alien woman's eyes filled with tears as she turned toward the child. Her trembling hand reached out, but she stopped, as if afraid Daniel might not let her touch it. Daniel hesitated for a second, his mind screaming questions. Was she dangerous? Was she truly the mother? Why had she left the baby in the cold? Yet when he looked at her, he didn't see a threat. He saw a starving, broken mother. Slowly, he nodded, and she reached forward to cradle the child in her arms. The moment her skin touched the baby's, the glowing symbols on the cloth flared with light, filling the room with a gentle radiance. The baby calmed instantly, pressing its tiny face into her chest. A soft hum escaped her lips, almost like a song, though the words were unknown. The melody, however, carried such raw emotion that Daniel felt his throat tighten. He lowered the lampstand to the floor, realizing he no longer needed it. The alien woman glanced at him, her lips trembling as she tried to form words in his language. "Safe," she whispered in a broken accent. "Baby, safe." Daniel nodded slowly, though his mind was still spinning. He had no idea what was happening or why fate had chosen his doorstep for this strange encounter. But in that moment, one truth was clear. The child and the mother were both helpless, and he was the only one standing between them and a world that might not show them kindness. The fire burned low in the fireplace, casting a soft glow across the room. Daniel sat on a wooden chair, his eyes fixed on the alien mother and her child. The baby lay nestled in her arms, its glow steady now, no longer flickering in weakness as it had before. The mother rocked slowly, her body still fragile, yet her movements gentle and full of care. Her song, strange and unfamiliar, filled the room with a rhythm that seemed older than time itself. Daniel felt as though he was watching something sacred, something that did not belong to this world but had been carried here by fate. For the first time since opening his door, Daniel's fear began to soften. The woman did not act like a threat. She did not try to harm him or take over his home. She looked like what she truly was. A starving mother who had been pushed to her limits, forced to leave her baby on a stranger's doorstep in desperation. Her eyes, though alien, reflected the same emotion any human mother would carry: love, fear, and hope for her child. Daniel realized in that moment that he could not think of her as a creature. She was a parent just like countless humans across the world. As the baby drifted into sleep, the woman finally looked back at him. Her lips moved, trying to form words. She spoke slowly, each syllable heavy and broken, but he understood pieces. "Run, war, home, gone," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Safe, only here." She pressed the baby closer to her chest, her glowing eyes shimmering with tears. Daniel leaned forward, listening, his chest tightening as her broken words formed fragments of her story. He understood enough. Her world was destroyed, her people hunted, and she had escaped with nothing but her child. Earth was not her plan, it was her last chance. Daniel felt a deep heaviness settle inside him. He could not imagine the pain of watching everything familiar burn, of leaving your home behind with no promise of safety. She must have walked through worlds of fire and darkness to end up on his doorstep. He looked around his small house. Plain walls, wooden shelves, a modest life, and for the first time he felt it was something worth more than he ever knew. It was not perfect, but it was safe, and somehow that was what she had been searching for. She tried to eat again, and Daniel offered her bread and a bowl of soup from his kitchen. She ate like someone who had not tasted food in days, each bite giving her a little more strength. Watching her, Daniel realized how fragile she truly was. Her frame looked thin, her skin pale, almost transparent in places. The glowing patterns across her arms dimmed and brightened like signals of her body's strength. After she finished, she sat back, breathing heavily but with more life in her eyes. As dawn crept closer, Daniel grew more aware of a new problem: his world outside. The neighbors, the town, the government. Strange lights had flickered near his house when the baby cried earlier, and he knew that anyone passing by might have noticed. People around here talked. If they saw something unusual, rumors would spread fast. He imagined what would happen if word reached the wrong ears. Men with weapons, scientists, or worse, soldiers would come. They would not see a mother and child. They would see a threat, a specimen, something to capture and study. The thought filled him with dread. The alien woman seemed to sense his worry. She looked at him carefully, tilting her head as if trying to read his thoughts. Then she placed her hand gently on his arm, her touch warm and steady. "Safe," she repeated, though her voice cracked. "You? Safe, baby, safe?" Her eyes pleaded with him in silence. Daniel hesitated but then gave a slow nod. He did not know how, but he knew he had to protect them. Something inside him, deeper than logic, told him it was the right thing to do. He thought of the baby's fragile cry, of the mother's desperate song, of the shadow in the woods that had carried pain greater than words. They had come to him by chance, but maybe it was not chance at all. Maybe it was a test, not of them, but of him, of his humanity. The day passed quietly. Daniel kept the curtains closed, afraid of anyone peeking in. He fed them as best as he could, gave them blankets, and even found one of his old jackets for the woman. She draped it around her shoulders awkwardly but with gratitude in her glowing eyes. She watched him closely, studying how he moved, how he spoke. From time to time, she tried to copy his words. Her voice was rough, the sounds twisted, but she was learning. When she pointed at the baby and whispered "child," Daniel felt a strange warmth in his chest. In a single day, they had built a bridge across two worlds. That night, when the town grew quiet again, Daniel sat by the fireplace. The woman and child slept near him, their glow faint and steady, casting light across the walls like stars. He looked at them and felt something he had not felt in years: belonging. For so long, his life had been ordinary and lonely, but now, in this strange twist of fate, he was no longer alone. Still, as he drifted into uneasy sleep, a shadow of fear lingered in his mind. The world outside would not remain blind forever. People would notice, and when they came, they would not ask questions. They would take, they would control, and they would destroy. Daniel knew that if he truly wanted to keep this fragile family safe, he would need more than good intentions. He would need courage, and soon. The following days passed in a quiet tension. Daniel did everything he could to keep the alien mother and her child hidden. He shut the curtains tightly, spoke little with his neighbors, and avoided even stepping outside unless he absolutely had to. Yet despite his efforts, he could feel the air around town changing. People were talking. A few times, when he had gone outside to collect wood for the fire, he noticed his neighbor, old Mrs. Hartley, standing at her porch with her arms crossed, watching his house longer than usual. Another day, he caught two kids from down the street whispering and pointing at his roof, saying they had seen lights flickering at night. Daniel tried to brush it off, but he knew in his heart that the strange glow from the baby had not gone unnoticed. Inside the house, the mother was growing stronger. She could stand for longer periods, and her voice, though still broken, carried more words now. She had learned Daniel's name and sometimes called him softly, almost with respect. The baby thrived under her care, its glow warmer, its cries less frequent. In those moments of calm, Daniel almost allowed himself to believe everything might be fine, that perhaps they could go unnoticed, that the world outside would not intrude. But deep down, he knew better. Something this extraordinary could not remain hidden for long. One night, as rain lashed against the windows and thunder rolled in the distance, Daniel heard a noise that made his stomach sink. At first, it was faint, like the hum of an engine far away. But soon it grew louder, and when he peeked outside, he saw beams of light moving slowly between the trees near his property. It wasn't just headlights from a passing car. These were search beams, sweeping methodically across the ground, cutting through the darkness. His heart clenched. Someone was searching. The mother, who had been humming softly to her child, froze as if she sensed the danger before Daniel even said a word. Her eyes widened, and her body tensed like a cornered animal. The baby whimpered, its glow flickering in fear. Daniel quickly signaled her to stay quiet and moved to the window. He could see them now. Figures dressed in dark uniforms, carrying flashlights and strange equipment that blinked with colored lights. They moved with precision, scanning the ground, holding devices that beeped every few seconds. Government agents, scientists, soldiers. He didn't know which, but he knew they weren't here by accident. The thought chilled him. Had the baby's strange energy drawn them here? Or had someone in town reported him? Either way, the answer didn't matter. They were here and they were close. Daniel's mind raced. He had no plan, no weapons, and no way to fight back. But he had something stronger. His determination not to let them take the mother and child. He turned to the alien woman, who was now holding her baby tightly, her glowing eyes begging him for help. She whispered one word in her broken voice, "Hide!" He nodded quickly. Moving fast, he grabbed blankets and threw them over the glow of the baby, dimming the light. Then he led them both toward a small trapdoor in the floor that opened into a shallow storage space beneath the house. It was not big or comfortable, but it was enough to conceal them. She hesitated, not wanting to leave his side. But Daniel placed his hands firmly on her shoulders and whispered, "Trust me." Finally, she climbed down with the child, her glowing eyes fixed on him as he lowered the trapdoor and covered it with a rug. No sooner had he stood back up than a sharp knock rattled his front door. His pulse hammered in his chest. He forced himself to breathe steadily and walk to the door, opening it just a crack. On his porch stood two men in dark jackets, their badges glinting in the beam of their flashlights. One of them spoke in a flat, commanding voice. "Evening, sir. We're with the Department of Energy. We're running a scan of the area after detecting unusual readings. Have you noticed anything strange here? Lights, noises, unusual activity?" Daniel's mouth went dry. He forced a casual smile, though his hands trembled behind the door. "Strange? No, just me here. What kind of readings are you talking about?" The agent narrowed his eyes, clearly unconvinced. "We'll need to take a quick look around. Routine check." Without waiting for permission, he stepped forward, but Daniel blocked the doorway with his body. "It's late," Daniel said firmly. "I don't see why." Before he could finish, the second agent's device beeped loudly, flashing red. "He's got something in there," the man barked. Daniel's heart sank. Suddenly, the baby's muffled whimper echoed faintly from beneath the floorboards. Daniel prayed the sound would be drowned by the thunder outside, but the agent's sharp eyes caught the faint glow seeping from the cracks in the wooden boards. One of them reached for his radio, muttering into it. "Target located. Send backup." Panic surged through Daniel. He could not let them find the mother and child. Thinking fast, he slammed the door shut and shoved the lock into place. The agents outside pounded on the door, shouting orders for him to open up. Daniel's mind screamed at him to run, to hide, to do anything. He rushed to the back of the house and pulled up the trapdoor. The mother looked at him with fear, her baby clutched tightly against her chest. "They're here," Daniel whispered urgently. "We have to go. Now." She nodded, though her eyes shone with tears. Daniel grabbed his old coat, threw a blanket around the child to hide its glow, and guided them toward the back door. Outside, more flashlights cut through the rain, and dogs barked in the distance. The agents were surrounding the house. Daniel's every nerve was on fire. One wrong move and it was over. But he didn't stop. He pulled the mother close, whispering instructions, and together they slipped into the stormy night, their only hope to disappear before the humans who hunted them closed in. The storm raged on as Daniel led the alien mother and her child through the soaked fields behind his house. The rain poured down in heavy sheets, masking their footsteps and dimming the sound of the baby's soft cries. The night was their only shield, and every flash of lightning threatened to reveal them. Daniel's heart pounded with every step, his ears tuned to the shouts and barking of dogs echoing behind them. The agents were closing in, their flashlights slicing through the darkness like blades. He knew he didn't have much time, but his determination burned stronger than his fear. He had made his choice. He would not let them take the mother and child. They stumbled into the cover of the woods, the trees bending under the storm. The alien mother clutched the child tightly against her chest, her glowing eyes darting around in fear. She had grown stronger over the past few days, but exhaustion still clung to her fragile body. Her legs trembled with every step, and Daniel often had to steady her. Yet, despite her weakness, she pressed forward, refusing to let go of the precious life in her arms. Her courage struck him deeply. She had lost everything, her world, her people, and yet she carried on for her child. It was a strength he could only admire. Behind them, the voices grew louder. The agents shouted commands, their dogs snarling as they picked up the scent. Daniel realized they would never outrun them. They needed a place to hide, at least until the storm passed. His mind raced as he tried to remember the area. Then it struck him. An old hunting cabin deeper in the woods, abandoned years ago, where he and his father had once taken shelter during storms. It was far enough to be hidden but close enough to reach if they moved fast. He grabbed the mother's hand and whispered urgently, "This way. Trust me." She nodded, her grip tightening as if placing her life fully in his hands. The journey through the forest felt endless. Branches snapped under their feet, mud clung to their boots, and the cold cut deep into their bones. Several times, Daniel thought the lights behind them were too close, that the men would burst through the trees at any moment. But each time, the storm covered their tracks, thunder rolling across the sky like a drum of war. At last, through the sheets of rain, Daniel spotted the outline of the cabin. Relief surged through him. It was still standing, its roof sagging but intact, its walls leaning but strong enough to hold. They rushed inside, dripping wet and gasping for air. The interior smelled of damp wood and dust, but it was shelter. Daniel quickly blocked the door with an old wooden beam and helped the mother to a corner. She lowered herself slowly, rocking the child in her arms as it whimpered softly. Daniel crouched in front of her, his breath heavy. "We'll be safe here, just for now," he whispered. But even as he said it, he knew it was temporary. The agents would not stop searching. They had machines, dogs, and orders. And once they discovered the truth, they would come with more than flashlights and radios, they would come with weapons. The mother seemed to understand his fear. She touched his arm gently, her glowing eyes fixed on his. In broken words, she said, "You risk for us. Why?" Her voice cracked with exhaustion, but her question was clear. Daniel swallowed hard, his throat tight. Why was he doing this? Why had he chosen to risk everything for beings not even of his world? He thought about it for a long moment, then finally answered in simple words. Because it's the right thing. Because you deserve a chance. Because your child deserves to live. Her eyes filled with tears, glimmering in the faint light. For the first time, she bowed her head slightly, a gesture of respect he did not fully understand but felt deeply. She whispered, "Human good." The baby, sensing her calm, gave a faint coo and reached its tiny glowing hand toward Daniel. He let the little fingers wrap around his own, and in that simple touch, he felt something powerful. A bond that crossed worlds, a reminder of what humanity truly meant. But the moment of peace was short-lived. Outside, faint lights flickered through the trees. The agents were sweeping closer. Their dogs barked wildly, catching the scent again. Daniel's chest tightened. He had only minutes left. He stood quickly, scanning the cabin for anything useful. His eyes landed on an old trapdoor in the floor, once used for storing hunting supplies. It was shallow, but it might be enough to conceal them if the agents barged in. He hurriedly cleared debris and opened it, motioning for the mother and child. She hesitated, her eyes fearful, but Daniel reassured her. "Stay here. I'll keep them away." Her trembling hand caught his wrist, as if begging him not to face the danger alone. But Daniel forced a smile, though fear burned in his veins. "Trust me. I won't let them take you." Slowly, she lowered herself and the baby into the hidden space. Daniel closed the trapdoor, covering it with an old rug and broken furniture. Then he stood in the center of the cabin, waiting. Moments later, the door burst open. Agents stormed inside, flashlights blinding, radios crackling. "Search everything," one barked. Daniel stood tall, his arms crossed, his face calm despite the storm in his chest. "This is private property," he said firmly. "You have no right to be here." The agents ignored him, sweeping through the room. One moved toward the trapdoor, but Daniel stepped in front of it. His body blocked the way, his voice hard. "Nothing here but me. Whatever you're looking for, you won't find it." The agent's scanner beeped faintly, but the storm outside caused interference, throwing off the signal. After several tense minutes, the leader cursed under his breath. "False reading. Move out." Reluctantly, they left, slamming the door behind them. Daniel's knees nearly buckled with relief. He rushed to the trapdoor and pulled it open. The mother climbed out, clutching her baby, her eyes wide with disbelief. She stared at him for a long moment, then whispered in her broken voice, "You save us. Human family." Daniel's throat tightened. He had never thought of himself as a hero. He was just an ordinary man in a small house, living an ordinary life. But now, in this stormy night, with an alien mother and child safe because of his choices, he realized something had changed. He was no longer alone. He was part of something greater, something that bound two worlds together through compassion. As dawn broke, the storm faded, leaving the forest drenched and silent. Daniel stood at the doorway of the cabin, the mother and child beside him. The rising sun bathed them in golden light. The baby smiled, its tiny glowing hand reaching toward the sky. The mother whispered something in her own language, a blessing or a promise, and Daniel knew their journey was only beginning. But whatever came next, they would face it together. And for the first time in his life, Daniel felt certain of who he was. Not just a man, but a protector, a symbol of what humanity could be when it chose compassion over fear.